Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining me here tonight. My name is Alyssa Thomas from Penguin and Fish, where we make lovely and quirky hand embroidery kits. And I'm here every weeknight at 8:30 p.m. Central Time, and it's a time where we can relax and craft together for about an hour. And we work on projects from beginning to end. So you can see the whole process and join me in making whatever we're making. And right now we are doing the Splendid Sampler to quilt along again. So we had a little vote over on the Penguin and Fish Crafters page, and the vote of what to work on tonight, and it was the grandfather clock. So we have started this already, and we can get to sewing tonight. So here it is. It looks crazy difficult, but it's not. It is foundation paper piecing. So that is what we will work on tonight, our little foundation paper piecing skills. We actually have all the pieces prepped and color-coded, and I'll show you what we did for that again. And I even made like a little code so I know what the heck's going on here. So I'll do a little review of that, and we'll be ready to go. So thanks for joining me again tonight, guys. I'm going to flip you around and we can get sewing. All right, sewing machine is set up again. Here we go. So the things that I need are my postcard, just a thick piece of paper with a thin edge but stiff, so like a filing folder would work for this, but I think a postcard works fabulous, so I have one on hand for this. I got my fabric together here. Again, I've color-coded. I'm using 3 fabrics right now, and I took little scraps and I've color-coded them for the pattern here. I also have my add a quarter ruler, so the add a quarter ruler that you can read it. And what this is, it's a ruler with a little 1/4 inch bump on it. And that's gonna just help us cut our fabric and measure our fabric really quickly. It's not necessary, it's an option, but after you've done a lot of paper piecing and you've used one of these, it just gets so relaxing and easy because you don't have to think about measuring or anything. So that's that. Here is our pieces so far. So I have them actually in order from the letter A all the way through to the applique pieces. But let's just take that off. I have it clipped here. So all of these pieces put together turn out to be the block here. So if we take a look at this, we can see that there's all this piecing, all that like magic piecing that looks like, how could anyone cut that perfect triangle and stuff? That's where foundation paper piecing comes in. And this whole arch here, that's what we're going to be doing first today. This circle here, as is this circle here. So we're just going to be doing this whole background area. And we're actually going to be doing, let me just get a little pointer here. We're going to actually be doing a rectangle that looks like this today. So all of these crazy small pieces, we're going to address those. I think this is probably the most intricate part of this whole thing here. So you can see we're doing this A piece here, and here are all the crazy pieces that we're going to eventually sew together. But one piece at a time, right? That seems overwhelming. This is a more intricate foundation paper piecing project, but it works the exact same as any other paper piecing. So here is A. This was all these templates were on the template sheet, and I made a photocopy and I've cut out each section. So this is the A section. You can see there's a lot of numbers, but in front of the number is the letter A on all of these, and it's labeled at the top. Then we have the B section. There we go, B's you know, B1, B2, B3, B4. The numbers represent the order that we'll be sewing things in, and the letters represent just the section we're working on. So yeah, it goes all the way through K. It looks like, yeah, all the way through letter K. So I'm gonna keep this in order here. I'm just gonna leave this clipped with my little code here, I think. This is gonna help us tonight. And when we cut out all these pieces, I color coded it. So here, for example, this is that arch. I've colored the A1. That's gonna be our first piece we do. We've color coded it. I've used the purple, but that is this swirly fabric here. And then the archway here is this kind of a brown dot. And then the ones that are white, we're gonna leave white. So I have white fabric. My whole outside area is gonna be white. So this is really important, I think, with these projects to color code this before you get going, because once I start rotating this all around and I have all these other pieces hanging out here, I'm gonna lose my orientation very quickly of what fabric to use where. So by just color coding it with some colored pencils beforehand, that's gonna like just ease your chest for sure, I think. So do that first. I mean, it did take us a while to do that. It took us a whole session to pick our colors and to put all these together. But look, we can even, you know, this piece connects to here. It starts to form the shape doing that. But all right, so I'm gonna set all of this to the side and we are gonna just focus on the first part. So sometimes a pattern, if you come upon a foundation paper piecing pattern, sometimes it won't have this border, and sometimes these pieces won't be separated. Like these are all the A's and it came as the template piece of A's. But sometimes you will get something that looks like it will just be the outline version of this. So it'll have all the lines and all the letters and numbers all over the place. So what you'll have to do is discover where all the A's are. So you might just be looking around it and be like, oh, here's a bunch of A's. And once you find all the A's, you cut the A's out as one piece in your pattern. So they've done it for us already, but that's not always the case. So you need to find all the A's and cut it out as one big section. And you won't have the seam allowance here, but we will always add a seam allowance. So this is just like a bonus that we have a visual seam allowance here. But anyway, we have the A's. You guys, I did blow mine up. I did enlarge this. There's some questions happening now. I did enlarge this pattern by 101%, which is a little silly, right? But we have kind of found that the templates sometimes are a little itty bitty smaller in the patterns in the back of the book, so we've just been enlarging them 101%. I don't think you really need to do that. You can always just add a extra edge. You know, I think it'll be probably just fine. You do want to make sure, you know, if there's like what you guys are saying, there's a little a 2-inch line in the Kindle one or something. You want to just make sure that it's printed the correct size. So if it seems small, if it seems shrunk down, make sure that you didn't on your photocopier do like fit to page or your printer or something. Make sure it's either 100% or we're doing 101% here. I think my mom does 102% on her photocopier. But all right, we're on the A section here. So the numbers are the order we go in. So now we can forget about the letter A. Now we're concerned with the numbers. So this is the order that we're going to put our fabric on. So we got A1, A2, A3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And you can kind of see how these are structured. You have a piece, and then every piece after that kind of slashes over the other one. So like A2 here slashed over A1, A3 slashed over both of them, A4 slashed over A5, and so forth. Because we want to sew straight lines every single time. We don't want to stitch like a Y seam or something. But that's just a little bit about the structure here. But yeah, let's give this a go. So we're going to start with A1. So let's look at this. It's the purple, and the purple is the swirly fabric here. So I'm going to take this, and what we want to do is we need a piece of fabric to start out with that's as big as this shape, plus a generous seam allowance. And what I mean by a generous seam allowance is bigger than this 1/4 inch. Like I even go to 1/2 inch sometimes. I'll just get like a blob that's as big as this shape plus a generous seam allowance. And you don't need a seam allowance to be perfect. Like you don't need all these angles perfect. Just get a blob that's at least as big as this shape and the generous seam allowance. So let's give that a go. One last thing before we get started. All of this side that we've colored on represents the back of our piece. So this is actually in reverse. The front is where it's going to be flipped over. So right here is where we want the right side of our fabric, and this will be the back side of our fabric. That's an important note. You don't want to forget that. So when I get my little blob shape, I'm going to put my fabric down so that the right side is down, because then we can lay this on top, and this is the wrong side, the right side. So again, I'm just kind of finding a little section in my fabric here that's kind of odd shaped and stuff. Thought maybe I could use that. You don't really have to worry about grain so much, I don't think. All right. Will the colors melt when I iron it? Charla, I don't think so. And the thing is, I am never going to put the iron on this side. So if I put my iron on this side of the colors here, then yeah, that could maybe come off onto my iron, but I'm only going to ever iron on this side. So this side will always be facing down when I iron. All right, so I am looking for a shape, a piece of fabric that's as big as this A1 plus our generous seam allowance. And, you know, this is part of our seam allowance here. So I think I can just go bloop around here and we will have our first shape. So I just kind of hold my piece in place, and you can kind of tuck it out of the way a little bit. So I'm just gonna go zoop around like there. I already have like a little weird cut piece. You know, this is a huge seam allowance here, but it's a good place to start. All right, and over there as well. So, okay, this is gonna be our first piece. It's a little big. I didn't need to make it that big, but it is kind of nice. It's better to be bigger than smaller for the seam allowance because you don't want to accidentally get any holes or something by it being too small. You know, we're gonna cover our piece by having it a little bit bigger. So what I'm gonna do for the first piece, so this is how you treat all of your A1 or all of your 1 pieces. So whatever block, whatever section you're on, whether it's A1 or B1 or B or C1, you're going to treat the ones all in the same way. And I do it by just putting a dab of glue on the back of the pattern there. That's it. And I will place the pattern on the wrong side of the fabric right in the middle, so my fabric covers that piece plus that generous seam allowance. And that's it. You have completed your first part of the section. So that's all we have to do for A1. So we got our crazy blob. It's attached. We're done. So that's the easy part. That's this, like I said, the same with every 1 piece. You're just cutting your shape that's as big as your shape here, plus the generous seam allowance, and gluing it down to the wrong side of the fabric. So next up is A2, and after the 1 piece, we're going to treat all the other pieces exactly the same. So the 1 is special, the rest is different, but they're all the same to each other. So from what we do now is going to be the same as what we do for like all the way through to 11. All right, but we go in order. So A2 is the next piece. So what we're going to do is get our postcard. We're going to prep, I'm going to get down here. We're going to prep the seam allowance for this. So we just made this total crazy blob. Look at all these weird cuts. We are going to have a perfect seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam allowance through this process, even though we're going to just be cutting crazy blobs. So I'm going to use this straight edge of my postcard to fold this template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover up everything we've done before. In this case, it's only A1. So I'm going to cover up A1. And I'm looking at the line. You know, there's a whole lot of lines going on here, but I'm only concerned with the line where A1, what we've done prior, where that touches the part that we're on now. So we're on A2. The only line that these two share is this one right here. So we're just concerned with that. We're going to pretend nothing else exists. So I'm going to cover up A1 and put my postcard along that line, the A2 and A1 line there. And I'm going to pretend none of these other lines exist. Just ignore them completely. All right, then we're going to fold the paper over. And again, don't worry about all those other lines. We're just going to fold this whole thing over, and we're going to extend the fold the whole way here. So now we're exposing our fabric here. And this is where the add a 1/4 ruler comes in. So the add a 1/4 ruler has that little ledge. That ledge, if we put it right up against the fold of our postcard here, it's going to stop. Like, I can close my eyes and feel this bump happen. So because the add a 1/4, that bump is a 1/4 inch in length, or 1/4 inch wide, I can put this on and then cut along here, and I'm going to have a perfect seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if you don't have an add a 1/4 ruler, this is perfectly easy. You can just take a normal ruler, measure a 1/4 inch from that fold, and cut as well. And it seems like, well, that's so easy. Of course I can do that. I'm not even thinking about that. That's the dumbest thing ever. Super easy. Why bother with an add a 1/4 ruler? You would be surprised how satisfying it is not to measure and to just plop this on and cut. It really, really makes the foundation paper piecing process easier and really satisfying. And if you're doing a lot of these this foundation paper piecing, I would invest in one of these. I thought it was so stupid when I heard about it. Not stupid, but like, why would I want that? I can just totally measure. But it really is. It's one of my favorite tools. You just bop it on there, cut, and there you go. So there is our perfect seam allowance there. And so that blob that we did, now we got a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is pretty fancy. So now we can fold this back. And we're similar to the A1 now. We need to find a piece of fabric. First of all, we have a color that we need to address. This is that kind of brown gold color. So that's this fabric here. And we need a piece of fabric that's as big as this tiny A2 piece plus our generous seam allowance. So again, more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So zoop. All right, look at these little pieces. I think I can use up a lot of my small pieces for this. Let's just get rid of this. So one thing to remember when you're trying to find a piece, remember to put, especially when it's a weird shaped piece, like triangles and stuff, put the right side of the fabric down before like placing your piece on top and finding that spot. So I think I can use this tiny piece here. Actually, it might be a hair too small. I think I might err on going a little bit bigger. And you know what? I have my scrap bin here. I bet you I can find quickly, here we go, a piece of this fabric. That might be too small as well. Let's just dig in here. I got a lot of pieces that are kind of that size. Oh, here we go. There's a bigger piece. I think we might be able to use that for a different one of these squares, though that's a pretty good size piece. All right, let's try and see if I can fit it on this guy. Put the right side down. You know what? Let's just err on doing a bigger piece for now. So I'm going to just throw this on here. Let's get that generous seam allowance. I like having a straight edge. I can align my fold with that straight edge, and that's like my 1/4 inch or so. Like I said, I go a little bit bigger. Then I need a 1/4 inch at least. Generous seam allowance from that point. We got it there. From this point, got it. This point, we got it too. So, all right, I think we got our piece here. So let's trim. Generous seam allowance. All right, so this is gonna be our piece. So what we wanna do now is match up our straight edge here with the straight edge here. So obviously, okay, and then right sides together, but obviously this edge is way bigger than this edge. But remember, we're trying to cover that A2 piece. So that's right there. So we want to kind of shimmy to where we think that's going to be. And I think maybe right there looks good, but I always like doing a test. So I can do that in a couple of ways. I like kind of putting my fingers on the points and seeing, do I have my seam allowance on either side? And I do. So I feel pretty confident because my piece in the back is so big. And I did my little check there. But I always think, especially when you're starting, it's a good idea to do a pretend sewing. So I take a pin, and because this piece is so small, I'm just going to use one pin, but sometimes I go two. So this is me pretend sewing along that line. Then I'm going to pretend press along that line. Let's just finger press this. And now I can check, did this piece cover my entire piece here with the generous seam allowance? And I think it totally did. So we're actually ready to sew now. So let's put this back. And let's get to the machine. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure she's getting free machines from places. That could be, but I'm not sure that's how the sewing machine places work. It might be, but I wouldn't totally count on that. All right, you guys. So we're going to sew exactly on this line here. So I'm going to actually remove my pin. You can leave it on, but because this piece is so small, I think I'm going to be fine holding it together here. So I'm going to sew exactly on this line. So I'm going to start right at that point and end at that point there. And I'm actually going to back tack, which just means going reverse once, or forward and then reverse and then forward again. But we're gonna go right on that line. You've only done it paper piecing once, Barbara, but definitely easier than piecing the same pattern, that's for sure. It's the magic trick, so you don't have to piece all this. All right, so I'm gonna go back and then forward again. That back tack just kind of locks things in place. I like doing it that way. All right, and then again, once I hit the next line, do another little back tack. And we can snip it off of the machine. So there you can see we've sewn right on that line. Here it is on this side, and we've started and stopped right at that line. I always like to trim my thread off right away, so I snip right up to the paper on the one side, and then I'll flip and do the fabric side as well, so I don't have all these crazy threads just laying everywhere. Well, that's that. So we are sewn. After this, we head over to press. So let's zip over there. Got my, man, I always make a mess with foundation paper piecing, so be ready for that. It is a messy little process. All right, move this guy out of the way, move this. And all right, I have my pressing mat here. So like I said earlier, I'm going to put the colorful side, the side with the template on, I'm gonna put that down against my piece because I don't want that to touch. I don't want my iron to touch all this. Like I think the ink might come off onto the iron. So I'm putting it down. We're gonna start by finger pressing that seam that we just made. So the seam doesn't go the entire way. Remember, because we're only sewing from that point to point. So I'm gonna press it over on the part that we did sew and then just extend that pressing a little bit to the end. So there we go. Starting there, and now we'll hit it with the iron here. Again, pressing that part that we sewed first. But that is it. So that is the process, you guys. That is A2. So it looks super crazy still. Like, how is this ever going to be anything? But as we keep adding pieces, we are going to keep carving out this shape. So we're done with A2. So let's move on to A3. This is sort of the process. We do our work here, sew, press, you know, do our folding, so press, and you get this kind of like a little circular motion in your space going, and I just kind of love that. The part that I really love is that I don't have to measure. I can just cut these blobs. It's just fun. So all right, moving on. A3. So first up, let's cut that good seam allowance. So I'm worried about now the line between A3 and everything that came before. So in this case, it's both A1 and 2. So it's this line right here that we're concerned with. Not any of this, not any of this, everywhere else, just this line in between what came before A3 and A3 itself. So that's our line this time, and we're gonna ignore everything else. So let's cover up what we already did and just put our postcard right on that A3 line there. And again, we're gonna ignore everything else. Fold it over. Now we got a couple pieces of fabric here, but we are still gonna get our perfect seam allowance. Let's trim that off. And here we are, lovely, perfect seam allowance. All right, let's fold this back and find a piece of fabric. Again, it looks like we're with the brown here. We might actually be able to use this scrap that we just did. We need a piece as big as the A3 piece plus the generous seam allowance. So let's see if we got it here. Right side down. So let's just get a sense of if we have it. It might be not quite long enough. What if we go this way? Yeah, I think this might be actually a hair small. So I think we had another piece like that. Yeah, let's try this one. So this one has that nice straight edge too. If you don't have a straight edge, you can cut one, and that will be helpful finding your piece, because again, get your piece on the fabric, the A3 piece, so it's on the fabric, and then just check on your fold if that straight edge is kind of on your fold there. So I think, yeah, it might be cutting it too close there. Let's just shimmy to the left a little. How's this? Oh, that's a generous seam allowance still. I think we're good there. What about this side? Ah, we're plenty good. All right, let's trim around here. We can use a little small scissors as well. So again, generous seam allowance, so a hair more than your 1/4 inch. There we go. That's our new blob. So we're gonna line that straight edge with the straight edge we just cut. So that's this edge now. Look at how we sliced that. All right, so right sides together. I'm gonna just start by placing it anywhere, like kind of where I remember that our A3 piece, and then I'm gonna just flip it around, holding it all. Okay, our A3 piece goes from here to here. Am I sort of on that? I think I might be good right there. Let's do our test. So I'm gonna we'll do 2 pins this time. Yeah, this is still really small. These are small pieces, so let's just use our 1 pin. This is my test sewing, my test pressing. All right, did we do it? Did we cover that A3 piece plus the generous seam allowance? Lots there, plenty up here. Let's check this corner. Yep, good there too. All right, perfect. So let's sew this. I'm gonna fold this back. This time I'll leave that pin on, and I'm just gonna pull it up out of the way. I'm gonna sew from that point to where that A3 line hits the next section there. All right, down, yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna sew right on that line again and add our little back tack as well. I actually like doing foundation paper piecing with small little pieces like this because I think you can use scraps more often, and they're easier to hold. They're not flapping around so much, the fabric. So all right, right on that line. I don't have to measure. All I have to do is follow the line, which is awesome. All right, do a little back tack. One thing to note, I am also shortening my stitch length. So I usually have it set at 12 for me, which means it's 1/12 of an inch. I actually twisted a little more my dial. I have an old school machine, so that's how it works here. So my stitches are all a little bit smaller than normal. And I do that because it makes more perforations in the paper. Because, you know, with each stitch, you're punching a hole in it. So the more little holes closer together, I think it's going to be easier to tear the paper later. So, all right, again, I always snip these buggers right away. Yay, Lisa! I hope you give this a try. It really, I mean, it looks complicated, and you know, it's something new. It's something that you need the process for, I think. But once you get this kind of rhythm going, it really is so relaxing. And again, I find it relaxing because you don't have to measure. You can just cut your blobs, use the add a quarter for, you know, to get those perfect seam allowances. I hate cutting and I hate measuring for projects. So just to be able to cut blobs that are just big enough, man, it takes the stuff that's annoying to me out of quilting. So, and you get like some magical piece that it looks like, how did you ever piece that together? So I like it. And you know, I'm doing a lot of checking and stuff too. But as I go, or if I'm doing this on my own, and we'll get into this later too as we keep going. You know, I'm talking a lot about it today with this piece, but I'll just cut my blobs, do a quick test to see if it lines up, if I have enough seam allowance, shimmy things left or right, you know, along the edge if it's not in the right spot, and I can show you guys that next, what to do if it's not in the right spot. But yeah, it'll get faster too. But here we go. So that's our A3 piece. We're done with that. So you're slicing. See, we've sliced another bit here, so you can start to see we're shaping that arc. So all of a sudden, our blobs are working for us, right? So let's move on here. So our next piece, so we just did A3, so A4 right there. That will be our next piece. So let's get our seam, or let's do our little foldy deal and get our, look how messy that seam allowance is now. That's going to clean up real quick. A4, you're up next. Okay, so postcard is first. Again, we're covering up everything that happened before A4. And we're only concerned with the line. Again, it gets confusing with all these lines everywhere, but we're just concerned with the piece we're on, A4, that line, the line that separates A4 from everything that happened before. So it's not this line here, because that's A6, that comes after. And it's not this side either, because that comes after as well. It's all of this down here. So this is that line that slices across all those numbers. That's the line that we are dealing with and ignoring everything else. Okay, so covering it up, and you cover up the parts that happened before as well. You want to expose the piece you're working on. So A4, along that line, ignoring everything else, folding it over. Look at all that bulky fabric here. All right, add a quarter, bop it on, slice, put the safety on, don't forget that. Get rid of those scraps, and magic, perfect seam allowance. Okay, so next up, we need our fabric. So again, it's this brown color, which is this fabric. I think these pieces are probably for sure too small now, so let's get to our big piece again here. There are lots of scraps though. We might be able to get it out of this weird section here. So again, right side down. I'm gonna just trim this. I'm never gonna use this little area for anything. So let's separate our piece and see if we can get a chunk out of here. So we need a piece of fabric as big as that A4 plus our generous seam allowance. We have, the seam allowance here is indicated, but again, I just always go a little bit bigger. And that's because if I accidentally shift left or right a little too much, then my bases are covered yet. I'm still, the worst would be is if you had a fabric that you thought was covering, like if you thought this was covering this point, I got my generous seam allowance, but I accidentally moved and then I sewed it on here, but look, now I have that point exposed. So by having a bigger piece, it allows me to be sloppier, really. I can shimmy back and forth just a little bit, and I know I'll still be able to cover my piece. So, it's better for me to just cut the blob away later than for me to, mess up and then have to take out. And if you have to take out these stitches, it's kind of difficult because you've perforated all this paper already. So you don't want that to tear. So better to be a bigger blob than have to go and do that. So all right, let's see if I can get this generous seam allowance out of this piece. Although I'm not sure, it's kind of the opposite direction. Although I think, oh, you know what? I think we got it just fine. Yeah. So if you don't have a good seam allowance, like if this was a big blob, I could put the fold where I want the straight edge, and I can just trim this. So let's give ourselves a good straight edge. Oop, I wiggled a little bit, but we're still okay. All right, there. Now I have my straight edge base, and that's what I'm going to put this fold on with a generous seam allowance. So okay, let's double check again. Putting my finger on the point there. Oop. Grab too much. All right, yeah, pretty generous seam allowance. This way, oh yeah, way generous. I'm actually going to shimmy it over because I got more on that side. And we have a good seam allowance up there too. Let's double check that we got it down here. I think I got to scooch it up a little bit. All right, I think that's our piece. Perfect. All right, so now matching up that straight edge. with the straight edge for this A4 piece. That's this one right here. Okay, let's just plop it on. I don't, like I said, I don't know. We're gonna test because I don't know, like if I went a little too far this way, I might be clipping my piece. So sometimes it's not always centering. So like it's my instincts. Your instinct might be to just center your piece on this line. Like, okay, it's going this edge to this edge. That's my instinct, and then I'm gonna flip it around and sew. But the problem is, it might actually need to be here to cover that piece, or maybe it needs to be up here even to cover that piece. So just to make sure, I always, do that test. And sometimes I do that, just the quick test where I kind of hold the 2 points, make sure I got seam allowances on either side of my finger, which I do. Or I will do that sewing test with the pin and where I flip it up and then take a look at it. But I'm lining up these points with my finger, and I think we are going to be in a good position. So I'm going to just give it a go. I think my blob is big enough that we're going to be okay. So I'm not going to pin it. I'm just going to hold it there. I recommend testing, especially if you've cut a piece that's maybe a little small or maybe close to only a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you didn't do a big enough blob, I would for sure test. And if you're doing this for the first time, make sure to test every single time just to get a feel for it. But yeah, we're just going for it now. So I didn't pin the piece, so I'm holding it, and I'm going to flip the whole thing over, set the piece down. And because I'm working with small pieces, they don't flop around. If I had a larger piece, I would definitely pin because that would be more floppy. But these small pieces are pretty slick. You can just kind of turn your piece over and it's fine. All right, sewing from that A4 line here to there, right to where it hits another shape. Get it in there. Do our little back tack there and right along this line. It's good practice to see if you're sewing straight too. Nope, there we go. Trim little scrappies. Come on, there we go. Flip around. All right, and then pressing. All right, over to the mat. Again, my mess just keeps growing for this. All right, let's do our finger pressing. So folding it over and just pressing along that line, our sewn line, and then extending it beyond a little bit there. It's starting to form. All right, again, remember, this side goes down, the side with all the ink and writing on. We want to stick to the side with the fabric. Okay. We're good. That piece is done. Arch is coming along here too. It's coming. Look at it. See, now our A2 piece, that tiny triangle, that's perfectly done now. That's surrounded by all of the other pieces. So that is our perfect, A2 piece finally finished as a little triangle. So that's a perfectly formed shape right there. All the rest of these with its crazy edges we'll get to this point as well. But look how small that is. It's so small. All right, but we have our shape going. So I think the next one, yeah, A5 kind of cuts across that shape even more. So let's do that one. I'm not sure we'll finish this section A tonight, but we're getting pretty far in it, I think. It is just this tiny piece, but look at, there's a lot of detail in here. So, all right, A5, let's cover up everything that happened before. We're concerned with only that line of A5 and everything that happened before, so let's cover that up. There we go. Fold it over. bump it on. Boop. Gotta make the sound effect. Cut our perfect seam allowances. And there we are. So let's see. It's still the same color. So that's that brown. Let's find another random weird angle here. I think right here. So putting the right side down again. We got a nice straight edge here. Let's use that to our advantage. You know, we got the triangle thing going. So let's try and place this A5 right there along this line. There we go. And so we got that generous seam allowance all the way around. Oh, that's super generous, maybe a little too generous. Let's scooch over. All right. Yep, so here we go. Oh yeah, that's plenty seam allowance there yet. All right, let's trim it. Where'd my little guy go? Here we go. All right, so I need the seam allowance to go at least out to here. So let's just yeah, trim up here. And we'll just cut straight across here. There we go. I think that will do. All right, we're only concerned with our nice straight edge there. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this wing here. All right, so let's match up that edge with the edge that we cut. So this A5 edge here, right there. Right sides together. Again, I'm just kind of placing it. I've cut my piece big enough that I can probably guarantee that I'm going to cover that A5 piece, but let's double check just to make sure. So let's flip this over. So A5 goes to here and down to here. Oh, I got tons on that side. I got a lot on this side, but not so much. I might want to scooch this up a hair. Boop. And, you know, we could do the test. I can actually do the test without the pins too, just kind of fold. The pins are the most helpful though. But there we go. Yep, we got our seam allowance up here too. Just wanted to check all of it. I think we're good right there. Let's fold it down. And so, oh man, Lisa, you sent your husband to the quilt shop today for 6 yards of fabric. I'm sure he enjoyed that. I think my husband would like doing that. He once picked all the fabric for a quilt. My mom was repairing his grandma's. Oops, I think I'm losing the seam allowance here. His grandma's. Let's place this again. One of his grandma's quilts that she gave him, and it was kind of getting torn up a little bit. So my mom fixed it for him, but it needed some replacement fabric. So he picked out all the replacement fabric for that, and I think he likes that sort of stuff. I actually think he'd really love doing quilts. I'm going to get him to do one sometime here. Okay, you guys, here's something a little bit different. We're hitting a seam allowance here. So when you hit a seam allowance, instead of just stopping, like when you run into it, like how we're doing all these other times, when I hit a seam allowance, I actually keep sewing, extending my line into the seam allowance. And I'll do another little back tack here. So let's see that for a sec. So that's a little bit different once you get to a seam allowance. But see, here we go. We started at our point. Oh, started down here, I mean, the A5. Started down here and then sewed all the way across. And I hit a seam allowance, like here, the seam allowance that goes all the way around, and I just kept extending it. Zoop, just right off the edge there. All right. So let's snip that. Don't want all these threads everywhere. Okay, and then let's press this. These guys always end up here. Gotta move them every time. All right, finger press it first, and extend it, extend that fold. Oh, look at, we totally have an arch going here. And give that a press. Cool, cool. All right, that piece is done. We are super duper carving that arch. It is totally curved. That's awesome. Okay, love it. Let's see. I think we might be able to do one more here tonight. So let's, what's next? We just did A5, so A6. All right, over here. Oh, this is good. So we'll do A6, which is the brown color again, but then A7 and A8 are a different color. So we can't forget that. It's white. That's going to be our white fabric. I didn't color those in, so it stayed white. So after this A6, we're going to switch to the white. But, you know, this is A8, but A9 is over here, and we go back to that brown. So we just got to keep our colors in check here. That's why it's really, really helpful to draw the colors in beforehand. Otherwise, you'd be checking back and forth all the time for what color you're supposed to do, and I think mistakes would happen real quick here. So, all right, let's do this A6 here. Cover everything that came before. Fold that edge, and you know, so we've sewn into it a little bit. You can just tear your paper along that seam. That's okay. Let's get on our line again though. So if you've accidentally extended your sewing too far in, you can do the same thing. Just tear the paper a little bit to get to that fold. Okay. Bump that up. Cut that all perfect. And back at it. So, all right, we need that piece that's big enough for this shape plus our extra seam allowance. I wonder if we can get by with one of these small pieces. I kind of don't think so. I think we're just, yeah, we're pushing the envelope a little bit there. Let's go back to our big piece. Let's use this chunk here. Get rid of this first. Here. We got a little nick out of here, so we got to pay attention to that. Let's pretend that's our straight edge. Maybe I can get, yeah. Let's use that down here. All right, I don't have enough seam allowance that way. I think maybe here. So I need a good straight edge first. So let's fold this up, and I'm gonna just plop my add a quarter ruler down here. Let's just get a good straight edge here. I'm gonna start off with a better straight edge. All right, that's gonna be my guide now. So I'm gonna align that fold again with that straight edge. Oop, there we go. So we have that parallel. All right, that's looking good. And now I think we got our generous square inch seam allowance all the way around. So I think we're ready. Let's cut our blob. All right, I just kind of need to go around here. Let's do that. About like that. Double check. Yeah, that should be plenty good. Flip it over. Right sides together. All right, let's do the pin test again here. So I'm going to pretend to sew. Oh, you need one of my postcards. Oh, that's awesome, Nolene. Well, they come in all my packages. All right, so let's get another one here. I do like the two pin method just because there's more points of contact. I think it's gonna make a nicer kind of fake seam. All right, let's fold it over. All right, does this piece cover our piece entirely here? So this side, it sure looks like it does. Same with this edge. Here's a high point here. Do we have enough seam allowance there? I think we just have enough seam allowance. So I think we are fine. Let's fold this back. Let's leave our pins this time. Bring it on over here. This will be our last sewing bit tonight here. Okay. So we have 2 seam allowances now that will go through that line. Let's remove this first pin. So I'm gonna kind of guess. I mean, you can actually follow the fold line a little bit, but I'm gonna start up in the seam allowance here. And I'm gonna back tack still. All right, now I'm gonna catch my A6 line. Remove my pin. Okay, another little back tack went into the seam allowance on that side as well. You didn't get one with the llama kit? Oh, Leslie, did you order it right from me? Oh, you didn't get that specific postcard. Oh, yeah, you know what? I have different postcards in them now. Oh yeah, so I might be actually out of those postcards. I might have to order some more. But yeah, there should be some postcards that come with every package though. All right, there we are. All right. Let's finger press this first. And press the strip. There we go. So carving away at this arch. So we got this side here, but I think that'll complete our arch, and then we just have to complete, you know, our top arch. There's an arch that happens up here too, and we'll carve that out when we do our white pieces here. But there we are. We got it going here. So this is we got through A6 here, so a little more than halfway done. But you know, we took time to talk about the process and stuff too. Just keep on cutting across, keep on carving. But that is foundation paper piecing, you guys. There is one extra step when we assemble all of the big pieces, but you will treat, as you're going through the sections, you'll treat them all exactly the same. You'll do your A1 piece by gluing it down. And actually now that we've got all these sewn lines, I don't need that glue there anymore. So I'm just gonna pull away. So I just, you know, I glued that there at the beginning. I just pulled that away so it doesn't like become permanent. So we're loose there. But like gluing that first one down, and then sewing all these other ones exactly the same. In every single section that you do, you will, no matter what the shape, you will treat exactly the same way as this. So that's the process, you guys. I hope you give it a go. It is, you know, it looks totally daunting. I agree, Barbara. But yes, once you get going, once you get that rhythm of, you know, the fold and your fabric, sew, press, fold, sew, press, you know, this whole circle thing that we got going on here. It just really makes things go swell. You really get in a rhythm here. But all right, I'm gonna flip you guys around and we'll call it an evening. Hello, everyone. Get a little situated. Got the fire on back there. Okay, so here we go. This is how small this is. It is this. Like, look at how tiny, tiny, tiny these little triangles are. It is just ridiculous. But from far away, look, it totally, you almost have a perfect arc going there just out of these straight lines. Like all these little straight lines are carving our circular shape. It's kind of how we were talking yesterday with embroidery to make like the S shapes or those curved shapes. You got to think in straight lines. So how many straight lines is it going to take to mimic, you know, a circular shape? And that's the same thing we're doing here. Totally perfect arc going on with straight shapes. Love it. So awesome. Thanks, you guys. I will get this up on YouTube right now. I know I'm a little behind on that again. I'll get last night's up as well. And I'll see you again here tomorrow. Tomorrow is new Black Thursday again. So, all right. Are you talking about this? The picture in the back? Oh, maybe way back there. Can you see anything back there? Let's see. Oh yeah, I have a painting right there. That's not mine. We got that at the art sale. But I do have another paint. I don't know if I can get way over there. I don't know. I'll have to give you a little living room tour sometime again. But all right, have a great night, you guys. I will see you tomorrow. Good night.